Welcome back, everyone, to the Rasball YouTube channel. We've been on hiatus for a little bit here once the season got kicking, but we're getting back into gear. I am Donkey Teeth, and I am joined today by my good friend Pat Fitzmaurice of the Football Girl. Pat and I are going to talk today about some 2021 Dynasty rankings. We're getting a jump on this early. We're talking top 10 on today's show. And the reason I asked you on here, Pat, is because you are probably the best ranker in the world for fantasy football right now. Number one overall right now in season for the Fantasy Pros accuracy competition, just dominating everybody. And you finished number 2 last year in draft rankings, right?
I believe so, yeah. And thank you for the kind words, DT. Always great to talk to you. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
And Pat's got a great podcast himself, if you haven't checked it out. Is it Fits on Football, right?
Fits on Fantasy, yeah.
Fits on Fantasy. Anywhere you can get your podcast, check that out. Awesome show. So, Pat, let's just dive right in. We don't have a whole lot of time here. We're going to throw this show into my article that I'm putting up on the top 10. So, as far as process goes, we've each put together a top 10 here. We're basing these rankings on half-point PPR scoring, one quarterback leagues. So we all know that Dynasty rankings, everybody's got their own philosophy. So I'm curious, when you put your list together, what was your process? How do you go about building your own Dynasty roster, and how are you valuing the different positions here? That's kind of all ties in together, right?
Sure. So I pretty much mock draft myself, especially like at the top rungs, when doing the top 25 or whatever. And eventually I sort of break it down by position. You can't just, if you're doing a draft yourself, you can't go off an overall list. You have to use some positional, make some positional choices and everything. But for the purposes of this exercise, for putting together the top echelon of the board, I just tried to, imagine myself in a mock draft. Would I take this guy or that guy? And some of these decisions are really tough, and I would come back, circle back to it a couple hours later and think, oh man, would I really do that? Or would I rather have this guy? So as far as the positional stuff, and by the way, there is nothing more fun than a dynasty startup, because you will pull your hair out trying to make decisions like this. And, I just went through one this summer where a bunch of buddies who are in redraft leagues with me, like I wanted to start a dynasty league. A lot of these guys have never played dynasty, and I sort of selected this, dream team of a couple different leagues I play in. And we did a startup super flex dynasty league. And now, like, a lot of these guys can't believe they hadn't come to dynasty before this. They love it so much. So as far as the positional thing, I mean, super flex versus one QB is obviously huge. For me personally, in a one QB dynasty league, like, I'm prioritizing running backs and wide receivers and not really thinking about, the fungibility when you are in a one QB, one tight end league of those positions, I think sort of drives down the value of guys at that position. So as great as Patrick Mahomes is, he didn't quite make it into my top 20. We can talk more about that. But that's basically it. Like, this guy or that guy, and just drilling down on these decisions for, there's so many either ors.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you hit on it, and we have a little bit different philosophy that we'll see in these rankings, because Patrick Mahomes almost did make my top 10. And same as you, every time I look at my list here, I'm fiddling with it. I'm moving guys around.
Yes.
I swear 10 minutes before the show, I was thinking about moving guys, but I'd already given you the list. So I'm sure this will change by the time I publish it. It's kind of a first draft. It's actually like a 10th draft. But my philosophy on quarterback, and this just comes from my experience in my leagues, I guess. This is the way that I've been warped, is that as dynasty leagues go along and you get to year 3, 4, 5, teams start to rebuild, and all the talent starts to rise to the top of the league. And you got 2, 3, 4 teams that are just absolutely loaded. And the difference ends up becoming, who's got Patrick Mahomes, who's got Travis Kelce, and because everybody's got really good running backs and wide receivers for the most part. So that's my philosophy. But obviously you can land your Justin Herbert for nothing. Lamar Jackson even was pretty much free in drafts, third rounder, a lot of drafts, at least late second rounder in Dynasty. So there's a lot of different ways you can cook the goose for sure. The question I wanted to ask you philosophically before we do dive in is when you're in that startup draft, and I know you're just kind of debating this player versus that player, but when you're building a roster, and I guess I'll share with you my philosophy first. I like to build around wide receivers for longevity purposes. I mean, we know every year the turnover in running back, these guys just don't have that long of shelf life, and that's reflected in NFL contracts and these holdouts and all that. They're just not valued by NFL teams because you can draft a rookie running back every year. So when I build my teams, I like to go for those elite receivers, the young elite receivers that I know are going to be a stalwart for my team for 10 years, and we both got DK Metcalf really high when we dive in here. But is that some of your thought process? Or are you're just drafting, best player available and screw it, I'll figure everything else out later?
No, I agree with you on that. I think you have to. Dynasty does drive up the value of wide receivers because they do have that longer life expectancy, I would say, for fantasy. And that has to be calculated with the ranking of running backs. That when is the bottom going to fall out on this guy? When do I take a Derrick Henry or an Ezekiel Elliott, a guy who's already had hundreds and hundreds of NFL carries? How many years can I expect to get out of this guy? And certainly you're not looking at guys with like an 8 or 9 year window, but you are looking at, you're hoping to get at least 2 or 3 years out of a guy. You have to have a little bit of a long view. So yeah, I do also tend to favor wide receivers. But I also do realize the importance of running back, and that is a hard position to fill in any fantasy league with, a heavy duty point score. Like getting those guys is always important. So I kind of factor that in too. So yeah, I tilt a little towards wide receivers, but I don't completely overlook the running back. So yeah, I guess we'll see that when we get into the list. And I was going to ask you, DT, like just generally, if you're in a startup, are you trying to go for more lean towards younger guys who have some degree of NFL achievement like that? Like, are you, I don't know, some people jump in and they're like, I want to try to win this right away. People are going to overvalue youth, and I'm going to capitalize on the discounts on established veterans. Other people really like to go young and dive in with the rookies right away and make it like a 2 or 3 year project. I guess basically when I do a startup, I'm more or less trying to win in year 2 with young guys who are still kind of ascendant, but still have like room to grow, I guess.
Right. So for me, I generally agree with you. I try to stay pretty open. Every draft room is different. If you get a group of guys that's just going all out, rookie nookie, shiny toy everywhere, and really bumping up these guys like, everyone from the 2020 draft class, then I may zag and try to build a little bit more veteran squad, but I'm still gonna get a couple of centerpieces that are young that I can lean on for the next 5 years at least. And then the other strategy that's always in the back of my mind is just punting year 1, like you said, trying to win year 2, and not even considering contending for year 1. And that's a tough thing to do, sitting out a whole year. But it's also pretty fun when you start, trading away the guys in season and accumulating 2022 draft or 2021 draft picks and all that. So definitely, I'd say my mindset in all of fantasy football and all of life is flexibility, stay open-minded, just kind of take what comes to me. And you'll see that in my rankings as we discuss these. You're going to convince me on some of these guys that you've got ranked higher. I'm not that difficult to sway my opinion. And part of me thinks that this exercise of ranking these positions together is kind of a fool's errand. Does it really matter I guess it does really matter when the draft pick comes up, but how you're valuing a wide receiver versus a running back is not so much important as when we get to, our running back list, because if you know what position you want to start with, that's kind of a big piece to the puzzle.
Sure. Yeah, I agree with that.
So Pat, any, just off the bat, when you looked at my rankings, my top 10 here, I sent them over to you. Was there anyone that jumped out that you're just like, I need some of what Donkey is smoking here? This is just ridiculous.
Nothing like nothing I just dismissed out of hand. I think, maybe we do philosophically differ on the value of a quarterback in a 1 QB league. I mean, it's hard to dismiss like Patrick Holmes as almost being a top 10 guy. I mean, what do you say about a guy who could very well be the best quarterback of all time who's just entering his prime? So it's hard for me to like wave off the idea of him being a top pick. Now, personally, he doesn't make my top 20. So, I mean, we might have a fundamental philosophical disagreement there. I thought Nick Chubb was maybe a little high. I know it's almost, and maybe I was thinking about it largely because most dynasty leagues tend to be full PPR. I know this one for our purposes is half PPR. The startup I just had is half PPR. I prefer that style, because it does preserve the value of backs like Nick Chubb and Derrick Henry, who do the vast majority of their damage on the ground rather than through the air. Like Chubb has been on a rampage lately, and he's still young. Like it's hard for me to argue with that, but Kareem Hunt's not going away. He's under contract with the Browns for multiple years now. And Hunt does have that, or Chubb does have that sort of limited, just the fact that he is limited to doing his damage mostly on the ground and isn't really a prolific pass catcher. So, I don't think it's outrageous or whatever, and he is still my top 20. I just thought 8 was maybe a little high.
Yeah, and he's actually a guy that I did have outside of my top 10 until this morning before I sent it out to you. I moved him up. Like I said, I'm fiddling with these. Interesting thing on Chubb. So he's only 25. He's only 24. He's going to be 25 coming into next year. But he's only under contract through next year. So I don't know. Do you think the Browns extend him? It's always kind of when I see a running back that is coming to the end of his contract, I do tend to devalue them, to be honest. And maybe I neglected to do that here just because of the uncertainty. You don't know what kind of system they're going to land in.
I agree with you on that totally. And it sort of colored my ranking of Aaron Jones, who, in redraft is certainly like a top 10, top 15 asset. And I don't have him in my top 20 for Dynasty. So I do agree with that. And by the way, the other guy I think we're going to discuss more is CeeDee Lamb, who I think we've got. We're sort of the opposite on like Lamb and Chubb, where we've got those guys where I've just barely got him in my top 20 and you've got him top 10. And I guess I feel that way about CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, and I mean, it's hard to argue with you on Lamb either. So for the listeners out there, Pat has CeeDee Lamb at number 7. He mentioned I had Chubb at number 8. CeeDee Lamb does make my top 20. Let's see. Let's just go through it here, Pat, because we got the same top 2. I've got DK Metcalf at number 1. You've got Christian McCaffrey at number 2. Philosophically, I mean, I really can't argue with McCaffrey at 1, especially if you're going for it next year. Is there really anything to discuss here? I mean, DK is an absolute freak, right? He's going to be an elite wide receiver 1 for the next 7 to 10 years, I'd say.
Yeah. It was a really tough decision between those two. I like most of the dynasty rankings I've looked at, CMC is pretty unanimously the top guy, but like you, I mean, I really considered having DK at number 1. He is just such a problem for defenses to deal with. And we saw that in the Monday night game in week 12 with Darius Slay, one of the better cornerbacks in the league, just not being able to do anything with Metcalf. I mean, he can run by people. He can completely outmuscle people. He can outleap people. He wins with speed. He wins at the point of catch. Like he is just an unsolvable problem for NFL defenses. And my God, the guy is 22 years old and turns 23 in a couple of weeks. Like, how good is this guy going to be for how long? Yeah, he is just a force of nature.
He is, and he made Darius Slay look like a child out there. He should have had at least 2 touchdowns. I mean, Russell Wilson missed him on the one. He got tackled on the 1 yard line, and then he dropped that other one.
Flat dropped one.
Yeah,
Yeah, that would have been like 200 yards and a touchdown if he
yeah,
grabs that one.
yeah. I had, yeah. We won't get into the rankings, but I had him really high for this week. So okay, we're in. I didn't look at any other dynasty rankings before I did this, and I tend to do that with my rankings. You would have seen it last year. In Kerryon Johnson, I ranked Kerryon Johnson really high last year. I caught a lot of crap for it from the fantasy community out there. My boy Kerryon here, I got him on the wall behind me. It didn't work out. I whiffed on that one. So you'll see it. And actually, that's kind of part of the reason why I wanted to do this exercise, to see if I'm just outrageously high on anybody here. So I'm curious as we get a little bit deeper into it. Moving on, I've got Tyreek Hill at number 3 and A.J. Brown at number 4. So I kind of tiered these guys out. And right now I have a 2 small tiers, DK Metcalf, Christian McCaffrey, and then Tyreek Hill and A.J. Brown. Tyreek is 27. He's a free agent in 2 years after 2023. My expectation with this ranking is that he resigns with the Chiefs, and he's there with Patrick Mahomes for the foreseeable, pretty much his entire career is my hope. If he isn't, then he gets knocked down this list for sure. And then A.J. Brown is number 4. He's only 23 years old. He's going to be 24 next year. Tannehill has looked really good. A.J. Brown will also be a free agent in 2023. What are your thoughts on these 2 rankings?
So I've got Brown number 8 and Tyreek number 9. Can't really argue with your ranking of those guys being higher. I'll tell you about Tyreek. The one thing, like, obviously, it's great that he is tethered to Patrick Mahomes. Amazing speed, amazing athlete, not just a speed receiver. I mean, this guy, for a guy so small, I mean, he actually goes up and like out muscles receivers for contested out DBs for contested catches. Just a phenomenal all-around player. To me, like, I did have a reservation on him with the character issues. And like, if you're measuring a player for redraft, character doesn't really weigh into it because you've basically got to hope a player is on a good behavior for 4 months. If you're in Dynasty, like, you have to look at it for 4 years. With Tyreek Hill's history, if he got into any sort of legal problem beyond the level of jaywalking, I have a feeling like the NFL would kind of throw the book at him. Like, we would be talking about probably a year-long suspension. And in Dynasty, you've got to worry about that for several years. It's not just a 4-month window. It's a multi-year window. So, like, that was, I'm not saying he would have been 3 for me, but like, that definitely held him down a bit in my top 10. So it was just something to consider. I think he's an amazing player. I love that he's connected to the best quarterback in the league. But I did have that as a sort of peripheral concern. And, A.J. Brown, it's just kind of a junior version of DK Metcalf, just so hard for people to contend with. You wish he was in a slightly heavier, pass-heavier offense. But, that's a pretty small concern and something that could change over time. So, yeah, both of those guys are pretty good cornerstones, though.
Sure. Yeah, and I actually moved both of them up yesterday when I was fiddling with it on the 9th draft, Pat. But no, I've got my article kind of framed out, and I've written about the Tyreek Hill stuff, and that's kind of why he wasn't in my top tier, to be honest, was the character issues, the child abuse allegations, and he had the college issues with domestic abuse. So you're right. I mentioned that last year in ranking him because I docked him a little bit for it last year, and it's looking like a little bit silly with how good he is, but it is always kind of lingering there in the back of the mind. Like, is this guy an idiot? He probably is, right?
Yeah, might be a little bit of a knucklehead, but like, obviously no one wants to see him run afoul of the law again. Like, it's great that he's playing this kind of football and bringing people joy with how good he is. Like, let's hope he stays on the right side of things.
Absolutely. So my next three here, I've got Dalvin Cook at number 5. I've got Devontae Adams at number 6 and DeAndre Hopkins at number 7. So I think this is kind of where we see that I'm valuing wide receivers maybe a little bit higher than you on running backs. And I didn't hit on the point that you made. I mean, you do need these elite running backs to win your league. I mean, you're going to need them at some point. So I'm certainly not saying that valuing running backs higher than I am is a bad strategy by any means. They're what do win you the league. What are your thoughts on me having Dalvin Cook here at number 5, Devontae Adams at number 6, and DeAndre Hopkins at number 7?
So I've got Cook at number 3. One of those guys who just, if he's healthy, there's no question he is a huge difference maker. 25 years old. He's in an offense that's totally built around him right now. Like they want to run the ball. I think whatever offense he would be in, though, he would be successful with his skill set. Completely versatile. I mean, that stretch he had earlier this season where he was just putting up circus numbers for like 3 straight weeks was pretty amazing, pretty convincing. And Adams is also my number 6. My only reservation with him, well, 2, I guess. I mean, he's about to turn 28. Not that big a deal. I mean, I think Adams is going to be productive for at least 5 or 6 more years. How committed are the Packers to Aaron Rodgers, the curious Jordan Love draft pick? We just don't know how long these two are going to be together. I think Adams is going to be terrific no matter which quarterback he's with, but obviously being with Rodgers, when Rodgers is still pretty close to the height of his powers, gives him a lot of his value. So that's one minor reservation, but I don't really disagree with you since we both have him 6th.
Yeah, and you're the Packers fan, so it is interesting to hear you mention that on Rodgers. I mean, you look at his contract, and they've got an option to get out of that contract after next year. So I assume that's why they drafted Love, was just in case he continued to appear to be on decline. I mean, his contract takes a huge leap up. I think they're going to pay him $24 million or something like that in 2022. So there is the chance, but God, the way that he's playing this year, there's absolutely no way that you don't keep him, right?
Yeah, maybe that was just a hedge. I mean, I personally think it's pretty stupid to hedge with the first-round draft pick on a team that needs defensive help and other wide receiver help. Yeah. Exactly. I hated the move, but you hope it's just that. Like it would be hard, especially with the reports that like Jordan Love was awful in training camp. It would be really hard for them to cut ties with Rodgers.
Yeah, unless he just looks like a different guy next year.
Yeah.
With you on Cook, I mean, splitting hairs here. Injury concerns. That's the only reason that he's not a little bit higher in mine. He seems to miss a couple games every year, and he's a running back. So that there's just always that chance that he has a catastrophic injury at this stage. How about Hopkins? You were a little bit lower on Hopkins, right?
Yeah, just out of my top 10. Nothing really bad to say about him. Like he's 28, so age kind of factored into it. Clearly one of the 3 or 4 best wide receivers. I mean, I think it's basically like Adams, Hill, Metcalf, and Hopkins for pure talent. I mean, maybe you could throw Michael Thomas into that group, maybe A.J. Brown. He is definitely in that top or at least second tier. Probably the top tier as far as talent. And he's attached to a good young quarterback in Kyler Murray. So, no real disagreement with your ranking. I guess maybe the age is why I've got him a little lower than you do.
Sure, and this is a good time to hit on that age because last year when I did these rankings, this year I always go back and I look at the all-time great receivers, and then the tier below. I mean, really the all-time greats. It's just Jerry Rice, and he was good until he was 40. But then that tier below, I start looking at Terrell Owens and Randy Moss and even. I don't know. Should I mention Ocho Cinco in there? These are the guys that were good when I was a little bit younger. But looking at these type players, they seem to produce until 33 at a high level, especially the fantasy numbers, 32, 33, 34, 35 in that range.
Sure.
Calvin Johnson was absolutely elite until he retired at 30. And then you got Jerry Rice, who did it until he was 40. We got Antonio Brown, who turned into a head case, but he was good until he was 30. He probably would have been elite if he had stayed in a system and not done Antonio Brown stuff. So when you're valuing them, is that what your expectation is, that they're going to produce at their highest level until what, age 32, 33?
Yeah, that's exactly the age I was thinking of. And I was going to ask you what number you have in mind at the point at which you maybe start to worry a little bit about decline. 32, 33 is kind of what I look at too. Like I don't even really think about a guy's age. Like if the guy's at 30, I still anticipate a couple more productive years, which is funny because, and this gets back to what you said earlier about how you value running backs and wide receivers. You know, we don't worry about a wide receiver at 30, a running back at 30. We're like, oh my God, you know, this guy's a ticking time bomb.
He's Frank Gore.
A young Frank Gore.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page there. You know, a couple of other ones I look at, like Marvin Harrison, Reggie Wayne,
Isaac Bruce, sure. Lots of guys like that.
These guys seem to even 34, 35. So there's it's not even a time like it happened with AJ Green, where we saw an injury is kind of caught up to him, and T.Y. Hilton. But I guess in the end, those guys didn't really end up being some of the greats, like we're talking about with a Randy Moss and a Terrell Owens, you know?
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I guess that's part of how we define these guys and their careers, whether they're in the, you know, Hall of Fame echelon or the Hall of Very Good echelon. Like, how well did they age?
Right. And Julio is going to be one of those Hall of Famers as he continues to produce, I would think, right?
Yeah, I mean, battling with injuries and you know, they seem to occur more and more frequently as he gets older. But when he's healthy, like, he's phenomenal.
Yeah. All right. Finishing up my top 10 here, and then we'll look at, you had a couple guys that made yours that didn't make mine. So we already mentioned Chubb at 8. We kind of hit on that one. Kamara, I've got at 9, and I did have him higher. I know you've got him higher. Would you have him at 5?
I've got him at 4, actually.
4. So Kamara, he's a curious case to me. He's 25 right now. He's going to be 26. They've got him locked up now until the year 2026 through 2025. My concerns and why I've knocked him down the past couple of weeks is Taysom Hill. And it appears that Taysom Hill is the quarterback of the future there, doesn't it?
I kind of don't think so. Like, I don't think that's a sustainable business model for an offense. So, like, I kind of think Tim Tebow showed that this doesn't work over the long haul. I mean, it's going great for them. You know, I think Sean Payton is committed to having Taysom Hill being part of this offense. But Taysom Hill's what, like 29 or 30 already? Like, I kind of don't see them going down this road permanently. You know, so agreed that, like, it's kind of a slap in the, well, not a slap in the face, a splash of cold water in the face for Kamara owners to see how this quarterback change has just gutted Kamara's fantasy value the last couple of weeks. But I don't really worry about it being a long-term thing. Like, ultimately, Kamara's pass catching ability is something so remarkable that it's something that cannot be responsibly squandered by a head coach, let alone a good head coach like Sean Payton. So I'm not really worried about Hill being the quarterback of the future and diminishing Kamara's value.
Fair enough. Yeah, probably a little bit overreactive on my part. You know, even the Denver game wasn't even a real game. You know, they didn't have a quarterback, so I would probably just throw that one out. They gave a lot of work to Latavius Murray. So I agree. A lot depends on, you know, what happens these next couple weeks without Drew Brees. That's, I think, why they're starting Taysom Hill, to see what they actually have for the future. I think Sean Payton wants him to be the guy. That was my read on it. You know, he compared him to Steve Young at one point. Maybe he's totally full of crap, but that's my read, is that he's going to be the guy. Even if it's not Taysom Hill, though, there is a little bit of concern, you know, that it's the Drew Brees offense and system that makes him elite that he is, for me, I guess. So I'll probably end up bumping him back up into that tier that I've got Dalvin Cook in after this conversation. But the concerns they're a little bit there for me.
Sure, I get it. As to that Steve Young comparison, Steve Young could throw a spiral. I'm not sure Taysom Hill could throw a spiral. So, yeah.
All right. Okay, so Michael Thomas was my last. He was number 10, and I did have him outside the top 10. He's another tough one to rank because of the quarterback uncertainty there in New Orleans. And then on top of that, you kind of get a little bit of Tyreek Hill vibes there. Just is everything all together? You know, he punched his teammate. Is he the guy that we once thought he was?
Yeah, so interesting. Another guy, like we almost can't get any sort of progress report on him for this year. First, because of the injury, then he's in his first couple of games back, like he and Breeze aren't quite clicking like they did in 2019. And then the Taysom Hill thing. And then actually in Taysom Hill's first start, he locks on to Michael Thomas the way Drew Brees had in 2019, which was kind of odd. But I think we know that Taysom Hill overall is not going to be a good thing for Michael Thomas. But yeah, he's 27. There is this criticism of him that he is a slant route guy, basically, and kind of a one-trick pony, although he performs that trick pretty amazingly well. Up until this year, he's never finished worse than wide receiver 6, I think, for fantasy. So it's hard to knock the guy, still in his prime. I've got him wide receiver 14th overall on this list, which I don't consider to be that much of a diss, although I know it's a little below consensus, a little below where you have him. I guess to me, he would be more of a second rounder and a startup than a first rounder.
That's where I had him ranked originally. And then I started thinking about it. Am I being a little overreactive to 1 year? This is the guy that we would have been totally fine taking number 1 or 2 coming into this year, right?
Yeah, I think so. I am trying to recall where he went in our startup draft this year. I want to say it was like 7th, but this was also super flex. So right. I think there were like 3 quarterbacks taken ahead of him. So,
gotcha.
Top half of the first round in a 1 QB league, he would have been for sure.
So that wraps my top 10. And like I said, it probably won't be my top 10. I think I'm going to release this top 10 article this week sometime. We're recording this on December 1st. They think they're going to change. I mean, if I release it next week, it'll probably change even more the more time I have to look at it. But looking at your top 10 here, Pat, you've got 3 guys in there that I didn't. And I like all 3 of these guys. And I think the guy that I am going to end up moving back in is the guy that you've got all the way up at number 5, Saquon Barkley. The more I think about the ACL injury, and I had docked him all the way down to, where did I have Saquon? In the teens? I had him at 13. He's only 23 years old still. He's a free agent in 2023. I guess my concern is that he's just going to rot away in New York. I had the ACL thing lingering in my mind, but then you think back to like the way Adrian Peterson came back from his ACL injury. Saquon could just be an Adrian Peterson type, couldn't he?
He could be, and it is a little worrisome that he has, had now 2 straight years kind of derailed by injuries. I mean, he got it back on track last year. You don't like to see that much knee damage incurred by an NFL running back. But as you said, 23, incredibly versatile skill set, speed, power, pass catching ability, just really the prototypical modern day NFL running back, even to a greater degree, I think, than CMC, just because Barkley is a bigger guy, theoretically better built to withstand the sort of pounding a featured back takes. So, it's like before this season, I mean, he would have been 2 behind CMC, and I've dropped him a little bit, but to me, he is still like a cornerstone piece.
Thinking about the knee more, I've got Nick Chubb up there at number 8, and I may move him down a little bit after our conversation here, but he has they totally rebuilt his knee in college, and he's been completely fine until this year.
Great example.
Yeah. So I think I'm with you. I think I'll probably move Saquon up to like number 10 in mine. A little bit of a hedge there, and maybe knock Michael Thomas back out, is my thinking here. So Pat, let's go ahead and wrap it here and leave a teaser for our 11 through 20 conversation. You already mentioned it. You got CeeDee Lamb at number 7 and Justin Jefferson at number 10. So we'll leave them wanting more. They can come back to hear our quick conversation on those two in the top 20. Again, keep an eye out for the top 20 rankings and go check out Pat's stuff over there at thefootballgirl.com. He is truly the rankings wizard.
Thanks for having me, DT.
Anytime, Pat.